Have you ever wondered about the sounds that echoed through the ancient world? Today, we're about to embark on an extraordinary journey. A journey to discover the oldest known melody ever uncovered by humanity. Prepare to be transported to another time, right now, on our channel. Hurrian songs. The Hurrian songs are a set of tunes written down in cuneiform on clay tablets found in the old Amorite Canaanite city of Ugarit, right on a headland in northern Syria. They're from around 1400 BC. One of these tablets, which is pretty much intact, has the Hurrian hymn to Nikal, also called the Hurrian cult hymn, a Zaluzi to the gods, or just H.6. This hymn is actually the oldest piece of music we have that's mostly complete and has its notes written down. We know the composers for some of these song fragments, but H.6 is a mystery. No name attached to it. So get this. The complete song we're talking about is one of around 36 hymns written in cuneiform on bits of clay tablets. These were dug up in the 50s from the royal palace of Ugarit, now known as Ras Shamra in Syria. They date back to the 14th century BC. But here's the cool part. This song is the only one we've got that's pretty much all there. First time anyone heard about these fragments was in 1955, and then again in 1968, thanks to Emmanuel Laroche. He was the guy who figured out that 3 different pieces, labeled RS 15.30, 15.49, and 17.387 by the archaeologists, were actually parts of one single tablet. In his catalog, Laroche listed these hymns as H.2 to H.30 and some smaller bits. The star of the show, our complete hymn, is listed as H.6. After Laroche, 2 big names, Assyriologist Anne Draftcorn-Kilmer and musicologist Marcel Duchesne-Guillemin, teamed up in the 70s. They cracked the code on these tablets, finding out stuff like tuning methods for a Babylonian lyre and musical intervals. Now, H.6 is special because it has the lyrics for a hymn to Nikal, a goddess who loved orchards, and it even has instructions for a singer with a 9-stringed instrument, probably a lyre. The New York Times was all over its first modern performance in 1974, saying it totally changed how we think about the beginnings of Western music. Even though the Hurrian hymn is older than other ancient music pieces, like the Sakhilos epitaph and the Delphic hymns, there's still some debate over how it should be played. Duchesne-Guillemin's version is up on the Ukresh webpage, but that's just one take on it. There are like 5 different interpretations, and they all sound totally different. Alright, so the text we're talking about is kind of a puzzle, and honestly, it's pretty hard to figure out what it's all about. So far, only one person has really taken a crack at translating it. Here is Thiel's English translation. I will bring X in the form of league 2 at the right foot of the divine throne. I will purify and change the sinfulness. Once sins are no longer covered and need no longer be changed, I feel well having accomplished the sacrifice. Once I have endeared the deity, she will love me in her heart. The offer I bring may wholly cover my sin. Bringing sesame oil may work on my behalf. In awe may I. The sterile may they make fertile. Grain may they bring forth. She, the wife, will bear children to the father. May she who has not yet borne children bear them. The tablet is in the collection of the National Museum of Damascus. The arrangement of tablet H6 is pretty unique. It's got the Hurrian lyrics right at the top, and then there's the double line divider. Below that, the text spirals around the tablet, flipping from one side to the other, which is something you don't see in Babylonian texts. Underneath the lyrics, there are these Akkadian musical instructions. They're basically interval names with some number signs. Now, people don't always agree on what these mean, and that's where a lot of the debate comes from. Right at the bottom, after a single line divider, there's this sort of signature in Akkadian that says, this is a song in the Nit Kibli tuning, a Zaluzi, written down by Hammurabi. That's the guy's name, and it's Semitic, just like another scribe's name, Ipsali, found on another tablet. There's no name attached to the complete hymn itself, but we do have names for some of the other fragmentary pieces, and they're all Hurrian names like Tapshuni, Puyena, Uriah, and Amaya. So, the tablet we're talking about is chilling in the Damascus Museum right now, and it's actually made up of 3 different pieces. LaRoche was the one who put it all together in his work and called it H6. Now, if you take a look at the tablet, you'll see it's split into 2 distinct sections. 1. So at the top of the tablet, we've got these 4 lines of a Hurrian hymn that are pretty much a mystery to us. Our grasp of the language isn't the best, so most of it goes over our heads. But we do catch a few words here and there, like Nakal, who's the goddess married to the moon god, something about a gift, a heart, and maybe something to do with fathers. Now, the way it's written is really something else. It's not like anything else we've seen from Mesopotamia. The lines start on the front, wrap right around the edge, and finish up on the back. The end part of the first 3 lines on the back starts off the next line back on the front. 2. Alright, moving down from those 4 lines above, right below them, on the front of the tablet, we've got these 2 lines that run across it. Sandwiched between these 2 lines are 2 pairs of wedges. Below that, there are 6 lines filled with Babylonian terms, each followed by numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, and 10. Now, flipping over to the back, there's this cool note called a colophon. It tells us the song's mode, called NFD Quibli, the composer's name, and the scribe's name. This mode is also known as Babylonian NT Quabli or Sumerian NIM Sub-Murab. It turns out this is part of a scale pieced together from another tablet in Philadelphia, not even realizing there were 7 possible modes. Since it's basically the C scale, we can figure out the pitch for each note in the Hurrian score from the pattern on the Philly tablet. But there were a couple of tricky words. One in line 5 was kind of messed up, and another in line 7 was read as Tupunu by LaRoche, which sort of made sense as our tablet, but didn't add much musically. So it was suggested to LaRoche a slight tweak to the syllables, turning it into Umbube, which is likely a Hurrian twist on Ernie Bibi. LaRoche agreed, and Kilmer's awesome photo on the cover of Sounds of Silence shows this reading is correct. There's more about the third tricky word, Oud Tadmari, but we'll get into that a bit later. There's this English musicologist, D. Wolstan, who had already nailed the explanation of a British Museum tablet with Professor Gurney. In 1971, he showed up at this big meeting in Paris, the Rencontre Assyriologique, and shared his analysis along with a music recording. He thought the numbers next to the musical terms showed which note to play from a certain scale section, but he hit a snag because he had to flip fourths into fifths to get a 5th note, and he couldn't explain why there was a 10 after a 3-note group. This left everyone scratching their heads, and it kind of opened the door for others to give it a shot. In 1972, Professor Guterbach gave some talks in Chicago and Germany. He counted the syllables in the hymn, but couldn't line them up with the notes. He did think the repeated syllables at the start of some lines were like choruses. Then, Anne Kilmer jumped in at a big meeting in Paris in 1973. She split up the hymn by the written lines, using the last words of one line on the back that started the next line on the front as choruses, just like Guterbach. She saw the musical terms as 2-note chords, where the higher note is the main melody and the lower one is the background. Kilmer suggested repeating these chords as many times as the number following each term. But her total chord count didn't match the number of syllables in the hymn, so she played the whole thing backwards. She also used some terms from line 5 for the choruses. Unfortunately, it didn't really add up. Kilmer added an extra bit at the end, using music from line 5 and doubling it to fit the 10. This made line 5 kind of its own thing, separate from the rest of the song starting at line 6. It's pretty complex, and maybe a bit of a stretch of an interpretation. We've got some words repeating in different parts of the sentences. One's at the end of sentence 5, another smack in the middle of sentence 2, and one right at the start of sentence 4. Sentences 1, 3, 6, and 7, they don't have any repeated words, so this idea that these are refrains doesn't really hold up. We're back to thinking these repeated words are more like catchlines, just like LaRoche suggested. Now, Kilmer wasn't on board with this because in Babylonia, catchlines were used differently, not like we're seeing here. But check this out. The writing is recto verso, which is not something you'd normally see in Mesopotamia. If you line up the transcription with the cuneiform, you'll notice these repetitions could actually work as catchlines, maybe when a musician flipped the tablet during a performance or while rehearsing. And here's another interesting bit. The musical terms. They repeat in the same sequence, forming what seems like musical themes. There's this first theme, let's call it theme A in line 6, which shows up again in line 7 and a bit of line 8. Then there's theme B in lines 8 and 9, with this triple repetition thing going on. And don't forget theme C, which is 2 phrases repeated 3 times, wrapping up the song. The structure is super important, but Kilmer missed it. She interpreted theme B way too much, thinking it was a refrain. But if you take a closer look at Kilmer's work, there are 3 key details that really back up this interpretation. Number 1, in the opening of the hymn, there are a couple of syllables, maybe 2 or 3 that are missing. Kilmer, however, only noted 1 missing syllable. Number 2, in the first line of the musical notation, it seems like there are just 2 vertical wedges following the third word instead of 3. Based on how the current signs are spaced, there doesn't seem to be space for a third wedge. Yet this third wedge is crucial for Kilmer's theory, which suggests that the total count of repetitions, 3 plus 1 plus what adds up to 7, matching the 7 syllables of the refrain. Number 3. So let's break this down a bit. Kilmer's got this idea that in the middle of line 5 of the hymn, the phrase of 2 double is super important. She thinks it hints at repeating the melody, the refrains, and the coda to make the music match the hymn's words. But honestly, there doesn't seem to be enough space for the 3 syllables she's talking about. Plus, it's a bit of a stretch to base such a big interpretation on part of a text that's not in great shape. And from a musicology standpoint, there are some doubts. Kilmer was given a heads up about this, and Wolstan had similar reservations in his review. One key point here is that music in the Near East has always been monodic, right up to today. If it were about heterophony, like in Greek music, you'd expect octaves to show up first, but they don't. Kilmer's work got published, and she even put out a record and booklet called Sounds from Silence in 1976. The historical parts are pretty solid with good reproductions and photos of the tablet from the Damascus Museum. But the musicological side? Not so sure about that. It's not just the polyphony issues. There are other aspects that don't quite add up. For instance, there's this theory about a 9 or 7-stringed lute used in ancient Mesopotamia, but that kind of instrument never existed there. When Kilmer and Crocker tried to piece together another tablet from the British Museum, they missed a crucial step involving the IR2 and started with a different tuning, leaving out one of the 7 modes. It's weird they didn't begin with the IR2's normal C-scale tuning. And there's this misunderstanding about modulation. They thought it was about sharpening and de-sharpening, but actually, it's about flattening and sharpening. This is important, especially since modulation always starts from the usual tuning. The British Museum tablet lays it all out, but Kilmer and Crocker seem to miss that point. In a fascinating discovery, the British Museum has unveiled a fragment that sheds light on an ancient musical instrument. Referred to as GISZ-AMI in Sumerian texts, this instrument is believed to be a stringed creation crafted from wood. This aligns with the fragment's revelation as GIS in Sumerian denotes wood. However, there's a bit of a puzzle here. Is it a lyre or a harp? Scholars are split on this. Let's delve deeper. The Babylonian name for this instrument is mum-mu'u, which crops up in various texts. Interestingly, it seems to describe a family of similar yet distinct instruments. Adding to its mystique, it's linked to the goddess Inanna. In other references, this instrument is termed Zazin-nu-ru, comparable to the Hittite word ziw. There's even a mention of a hun-zimem and a great zinar reminiscent of the large Sumerian lyre kithara. This was a substantial instrument that touched the ground, continuing its legacy well beyond the Sumerian era. An impressive example of such a lyre was discovered by N. Begik at Inandak. Picture this. Magnificent vase in the Ankara Museum depicts two musicians playing an instrument taller than themselves. This 16th century BC lyre mirrors the grand Sumerian upright lyres seen in Ur, famously played by animal musicians. But there's more. Lexicographical lists translate Jiz-A-M-I as CD by Irutu, possibly referring to an instrument or a specific tuning involving a group of strings. The translation of these technical terms remains a topic of debate. To sum up, this intriguing journey through ancient musicology reveals that the Jiz-A-M-I mentioned in the British Museum fragment is not a harp, but rather a lyre kithara. This discovery not only enriches our understanding of ancient music, but also connects us with the cultural and spiritual life of civilizations long gone. Now, let's talk about the Akkadian cuneiform music notation. Picture this, a 9-string lyre from way back in the day. We're talking about the 18th century BC. This ancient instrument and its music are described in 3 Akkadian tablets, with 2 from the late Babylonian period and 1 from the Old Babylonian period. Now here's where it gets cool. The Babylonians were all about tuning their lyres to a diatonic scale, but they had a unique way of talking about music. They didn't just say fifth or fourth like we do. Instead, they had specific terms for the different groups of strings you could stretch your hand across on their 7-string lyre. Yeah, you heard that right. Their theory was based on a 7-string lyre, but the actual lyre they used had 9 strings. In total, there are 14 terms used to describe all these string combinations. Imagine playing a lyre and knowing 14 different ways to group the strings. These groups ranged from pairs spanning 6 strings to those covering just 3. The Babylonians were so methodical that they even arranged these terms in pairs in their texts, starting with string number pairs and then moving on to their old Babylonian names and translations. 1-5, Nis Turin, raising of the heel, formerly read Nis Gab Arin, raising of the counterpart. 7-5, Serum, tune, sound, song. 2-6, Isartum, straight in proper condition. 1-6, Salsatum, third. 3-7, Ambubum, reed pipe. 2-7, Rebutum, fourth. 4-1, Nid Quablim, casting down of the middle. 1-3, Iscum, lot, portion. 5-2, Quablitum, middle. 2-4, Titur Quablitum, bridge of the middle. 6-3, Kitmum, covering, closing. 3-5, Titur Istarmin, bridge of the Istarum. 7-4, Pitum, opening. 4-6, S/Zerdum, loosening, gripping. Each pair's first item serves as a tuning name. These tunings are either fifths, Nisgrab Arim, Isartum, Amubumum, or fourths, Nid Quablim, Quablitum, Kitmum, and Pitum. A modern scholar has labeled these as primary intervals. The remaining 7 intervals, not used as tuning names and consisting of thirds and sixes, are termed secondary intervals. A transcription of the first 2 lines of the notation on H.6 reads, Quablite 3, Ir Bute 1, Quablite 3, Sa'ari 1, I Sarte 10, Us Ta Ma'ari, Titi Mi Sarte 2, Z Irte 1, Sa Ha H Re 2, Sa As Sate 2, Ir Bute 2. The way the interval names pop up randomly, sitting under what seems like song lyrics, and how numbers keep getting thrown in, makes us think we're looking at actual musical notes. There's some funky language stuff too. Like Erbute in these hymn notes matches up with the Rebutum in some older theory text. A bunch of other terms are a bit off from their Akkadian originals, but that's expected since they're from different languages. And hey, there are some rare words in there, maybe even Hurrian, not just Akkadian. These odd words might be tweaking the music notes they're next to. Now, H.6's text is a real head-scratcher, partly because Hurrian is a tough language to crack, and partly because the clay tablet's missing some bits. Plus, the language used here is like a local Ugarit dialect, pretty different from what we usually see. The way they pronounce words might have even changed to fit the music. Despite all the challenges, it's clear this text is all about worship and offerings to Nakal, the moon god's wife. It's set out in 4 lines, and there's this weird thing where the last 7 syllables of each line are repeated at the start of the next. LaRoche thought this was like a Babylonian scribe trick to link text, but Guderbach and Kilmer disagree, saying it's more like a refrain breaking the text into parts. Duchesne-Guillermin points out that the way the text spirals from the front to the back of the tablet is a style you don't see in Babylon, so maybe that's why they needed these repeating bits. This whole thing stacks up in a pretty cool way against classic Jewish music, the kind that's been held onto tightly in religious services. The massive bunch of Jewish songs that Idlesong collected from 1914 to 1932 from Jewish communities all over the Near East and Europe really helps us see the similarities and differences. For instance, take this one psalm from the Babylonian Jewish community. 1. The ambitious never exceeds 7 notes, just as in the Hurrian hymn. It therefore seems to go back to a rather primitive period. Number 2. The structure offers 3 themes in a continuous text. The latter cannot therefore be the cause of the musical repetitions. Number 3. The grouping of the syllables produces messages which are slightly adorned on alternate binary and ternary rhythms, which groups of 6 notes or more, as in our hymn. Number 4. There are endings and seconds comparable to the added notes. It's fascinating to consider that the Babylonian musical tradition likely extended beyond Mesopotamia, influencing the entire diaspora. This is supported by various instances such as the Hurrians, neighbors of Israel, possibly serving as a bridge of cultural exchange well before the Jewish captivity in Babylon. In my interpretation of the reconstructed melody, I've chosen to repeat the initial phrase, drawing inspiration from traditional Jewish songs. This decision is partly based on the notation seen in the ancient text, where the pairs of small angle wedges on the double horizontal line seem to indicate a repetition. Interestingly, the first phrase might have been performed by a soloist, not a choir, suggested by the presence of a trill. This aspect of solo performance finds echoes in the ancient Christian music of Syria. Collections by Dom Parasot and Dom Jeanine, though compiled only half a century ago, reflect a persisting minority tradition. This music, primarily diatonic and often revolving around 3 themes, includes beautifully ornamented alleluias with unique rhythmic fluctuations and conclusive seconds. A striking resemblance is found in a part of a long composition, reminiscent of a theme in the Hurrian hymn. This segment features a repeated double motif, ending in a condensed form of the same pattern, illustrating how musical motifs can traverse centuries. This continuity is evident in Gregorian chant, a descendant of the Oriental tradition, especially in pieces like Veni Creator, where the influence of ending in seconds is noticeable. The recorded performance I'm referring to, by Maurice Trail's male choir from Liège, Belgium, somehow resonates familiarly with us. It doesn't sound alien, rather it strikes a chord of recognition, suggesting that this might indeed be a part of our collective ancestral heritage. Reflecting on Professor R.P. Winnington Ingram's words, it's truly incredible how these ancient documents have emerged one after another, shedding new light each time. He noted, "It is really fascinating the way these documents have turned up in succession and provided a progressive illumination. And it is astonishing to find such a highly developed theory at this early date. The sheer depth and sophistication of the theories uncovered from these ancient texts are mind-blowing." What stands out as particularly intriguing is the discovery that the Babylonians used a heptatonic system, which is remarkably similar to the musical scale we use today. It's like uncovering a hidden connection between our current musical understanding and these ancient civilizations. The spread of this Babylonian influence is a fascinating journey in itself. It reached the Mediterranean shores and, through a blend of Jewish and Syro-Chaldean cultural heritages, managed to weave its way into early medieval Europe. This influence is not just a fleeting presence. It ingrained itself into the fabric of European musical traditions and remained largely unchanged until something as revolutionary as polyphony came along. It's almost as if these ancient melodies and theories have been silently accompanying us throughout centuries, morphing and adapting, but always keeping a trace of their original essence. That's the beauty of music and its evolution. It's like a living, breathing history lesson, telling stories of cultures, influences, and innovations over countless generations. Thank you for journeying with us through the echoes of time to uncover the oldest known melody ever discovered. The story of this incredible find is as enchanting as the melody itself. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.